Hello everybody, Steve Griffiths here, developer of the MTPredictor software program. Before we start this particular video, I'll just like to have a quick look at our risk disclaimer and just remind you that all examples in these videos should be considered as hypothetical. No trades are actually taken, they're just shown for illustration and training purposes only. Also remind you there's a risk of loss in trading and investing. I'll say that another way. All professional traders know and understand, and more importantly accept, that losses can and will and do happen when trading. It's important to understand that losses can and will and do happen. Also remind you that all trade decisions are your own sole responsibility. Okay, let's now get on to the video. In this help video, I'd like to look at understanding how our automatic trade setups appear on our chart and in our scanner. I'll be using MTPredictor version 8, but the same applies to our NinjaTrader 7 and NinjaTrader 8 versions. You see on our chart we have automatic setups on our chart, and also if we look at our scanner we have our setups coming in the scanner as well. So let's see how these actually unfold. We do our analysis as the bar completes. So if I use my trading mode here, or bar replay, I'm just going to jump back to a little bit before this TS3 buy setup and move forward bar by bar and show how these come on the chart. You can see there's a history triangle there, and I'll be looking at that in detail in the next video. So I'm just looking at how our setups appear on the chart in this particular video. So we work on the completed bar. So each time a bar completes, our routines run, and then we do our analysis. So let's move forward another bar. There's nothing here. Let's move forward another bar. Nothing there. Move forward another bar. You can see as soon as this bar is completed in real time, it doesn't matter what time frame we're looking at, the same applies for any time frame. So as soon as the bar completes, if there's a TS3 setup, it will be then printed on your chart like this, as long as it's a valid trade setup, i.e. at our WPT levels and a blue reversal bar. It will also then appear in the scanner as well. At this point in time, you can then right mouse click over the correctly colored reversal bar. Remember, if you're looking for a buy setup, the reversal bar has to be blue. If you're looking for a sell, it has to be red. It won't work on black bars because they're neutral. We then do analysis, and as you can see, this gives you your entry level, your stop level, and your position sizing. In other words, the number of lots, contracts, or shares based on your risk, based on your account. Remember, you can change your account to have different account sizes and different account currencies for your position sizing. We then move forward. As you can see here, you're then taken into a long trade. As the market moves forward, you weren't stopped out, and it carries on up. And if I then turn training mode off, you can see it would have got up to the first target there, where I'll just do the training mode so it clears it up a little bit. Goes up to there. Goes up to the first target where a profit of 3.6R would be available. Remember, we use position sizing, so our profits are not just profits and losses in dollars, they are profits and losses in risk units, in other words, relative to the risk required to take the trade. So in other words, this would be one risk unit here, and the profit would have been plus 3.6R risk units there as well. We do have losing trades, obviously. If I turn this off, if I go back to, say, this VS setup here, and if I use our trading mode to come to this VS setup here, need to jump back to here. Whoops, just get the clear everything off and then do the reset. There it is. Now we move forward. There's a VS sell. I know it's against a blue MTP trend, but I just want to show you that we do have losing trades. Do your analysis, move forward. You'd been taken into a short trade. Market then goes sideways and then goes up, and then that would have been a losing trade. But I also want to show what happens as the markets move forward and we get a setup that's printed on the chart, but it's not filled. In other words, it's not an executable trade. So far we've seen here we had a TS3 buy setup where the market came in and gave us a trade in which the trade setup was filled. Remember, we went above the buy, the entry level stop, so you would have been actually into a trade. But let's see what happens if the trade is not executable, and I'll show you what I mean in that in a second. So just ignore that I'm actually in a long trade already here. I just want to show you what can happen sometimes. I know this confuses some people. This is why I wanted to do this video. Because some people look at this and they think, why is the setup removed from the chart? And I'll show you why. Let's go through here a bit further. Suddenly we have a VS sell setup. Again, please ignore that it's against a blue MTP trend, so this wouldn't be a valid setup anyway. But this shows a valid setup on the chart. There it is, a setup on the chart. If I move forward one bar, you can see it suddenly disappears. Now some people say, well, why on earth has that setup disappeared? Surely that's unfair that you take setups off the chart. Well, let's have a look at this in a bit more detail. Here is a potential sell setup. Again, it's not valid because we're against a blue MTP trend, but I just want to show you what, or the reason why we remove these from the charts. So if I place the analysis on, so this would be an executable trade. In other words, if the market goes down below 79.50, in other words, goes down below your entry stop before going up to your stop trigger. So can you see that? If the market then went down, it would then be in a potential short trade. If I move forward one bar, can you see here how the market has gone up and it's gone through what would have been your stop trigger before? I say that again, that's the important point, before it actually hit your entry level. In other words, the trade wasn't executed. So all it was a potential trade. So this was a potential trade coming up here that was never executed. In other words, the market never went to your entry level before going beyond what would have been your stop level, therefore invalidating the trade setup. So in other words, there's no need to keep that particular setup on the chart. So that's why we remove it, and that's the only time we remove setups is when they go through the stop trigger before the entry trigger. In other words, invalidating the trade setup before you would have actually been in a trade. In other words, the trade was non-executable, was invalidated, and therefore there's no reason at all to keep that setup on the chart. So that's the reason for doing this video, just to explain that and show you how that can happen sometimes. But it's not cheating or anything, it just means that there's no reason to keep that on the chart because the trade would have not been executable. The only time we keep the setups on the chart when they would have been executed and then filled and then stopped out are when we have these history triangles. And I'll go into these in a bit more detail in a second, but I'll just show you very, very quickly on this. If I go to jump to here and I go forward, you can see here is a valid TS2 buy setup. Let's do the analysis. That would have been the level that the market should go to get you into a long trade. If I go forward one bar, you can see here it went up, got you into a long trade, then came down to the same level, and you would have been stopped out. So if you were entered on the next bar and then stopped out at that level there, the software then puts a history triangle there. In other words, shows you that there was a potential trade setup that would have been filled and then stopped out. If I clear this all off, you can see there's the history triangle. The software allows you to hover over that correctly colored reversal bar, do your analysis, so you can actually see what the setup would have been at the time. In other words, that would have been a valid trade setup that would have been taken in on the next bar and then stopped out, whereas the other one we looked at would not have been. So in other words, we don't hide trades. When there are valid trade setups that would have been entered and then stopped out, they're replaced with a history triangle. You can do the analysis on them to see whether they would have been valid and see what the result would have been. But when the market, if I go forward again, comes into valid trade setups, obviously we know that one's a good trade setup anyway, but if the market comes into a potential trade setup like this one, where the market goes beyond what would have been the stop level before the entry level, that's the only time we take off the labels, because there's no reason to keep them on, because there would not have been a trade setup at the time. So hopefully that explains a little more detail about how our automatic trade setups are placed on the chart and also our history triangles. And what I'll do is I'll perhaps do another quick video showing the history triangles in a bit more depth as well.